Welcome to this explainer. Listen, if you clicked on this, I'm guessing you are just tired. You've been doing the work, holding the line, and yet you're totally exhausted. Maybe you feel like you're just hitting a brick wall day after day. Well, today we're going to look at a fascinating source text that acts as a structured roadmap for the exact struggles you're going through right now. It literally outlines what the scriptural pattern of a breakthrough looks like. And hey, spoiler alert, it rarely looks like a victory lap right out of the gate. So let's dive right in. I want you to ask yourself a seriously profound question. What if the hardest moment of your life isn't actually the end of your story, but the exact biblical precursor to a massive shift? Think about it. Most people quit right before the breakthrough comes. And it's not because they lost their faith. It's usually because no one ever mapped out for them what that final grueling mile actually looks and feels like. Let's just validate what you might be facing right at this very moment. Closed doors, tight money, unanswered prayers. You've been faithful, you've done everything right, and yet things seem to be actively getting worse, right? There's this quiet, kind of terrifying fear that whispers, man, maybe God just isn't moving at all. But as our source material reveals, this exact scenario happened to almost every major figure in the Bible right before everything changed. Section 1, the historical setup. Just look at the sheer panic in this historical situation. Pharaoh's army is charging in from behind, and an impassable sea is sitting right in front of them. Literally nowhere to go. Exodus 14:10 records their cry, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us here to die?" You really have to understand, this wasn't just simple doubt. No way. This was total blinding desperation from a faithful people who felt completely and utterly surrounded. And right at that moment of peak panic, God gives Moses a completely mind-bending instruction. He tells them to move forward. So the absolutely crucial point here is this. The command to move came before the sea parted, not after. God told them to start marching while the water was absolutely still in the way. And this leads us directly into the core signs that you might be in this exact same pre-breakthrough phase. Section 2, internal trials, pressure and exhaustion. Okay, sign number 1, everything around you feels like it's closing in. When pressure increases from every single direction at the exact same time, well, it feels like a punishment. But it's actually a mechanical requirement for growth. Think about a tiny seed. For a seed to become a massive tree, it has to be buried. It's plunged into absolute darkness and pressed on literally every side by the crushing weight of the soil. And this brilliantly illustrates the reality of that intense pressure. As John 12:24 points out, the seed must die to bear fruit. Now, from the outside observer's perspective, that buried seed looks completely finished. It looks dead, right? But underground, hidden in the dark, under all that insane pressure, it is furiously preparing for life. It's building the structural integrity it desperately needs to push through the dirt. So we have to completely reframe how we view our current circumstances. You're probably viewing your intense pressure on side A as a punishment. You think, I must have done something wrong. But the scriptural pattern places it firmly on side B, preparation. This pressure is not a penalty. It is divine preparation for the immense weight of the breakthrough that's coming your way. Which brings us to sign number 2. You feel an unusual, absolutely overwhelming urge to just give up. And I don't mean just a fleeting thought. We are talking about a bone-deep exhaustion where you feel you simply cannot take one single step more. Our source text deeply validates this feeling. If you want to quit right now, let me tell you, you are in incredibly good company. Let's look at the mighty prophet Elijah. This is the guy who literally just called down fire from heaven in this epic, monumental showdown. Yet, right after that, he ends up sitting under a juniper tree, just utterly broken. He says in 1 Kings 19:4, "It is enough, Lord. Take away my life." He was completely done. And what's super fascinating here is how God responds. God doesn't give him some harsh lecture on faith. No, God sends an angel to give him warm food and tells him to get some sleep. God knew Elijah wasn't weak. He was just exhausted. Exhaustion right before a breakthrough is pretty much standard operating procedure in Scripture. Section 3, external trials, loud enemies and divine silence. Moving on to sign number 3, the enemy is louder than usual. Think about it. When David was just about to become king, Saul hunted him with this relentless, almost animalistic intensity. When Jesus was about to begin his public ministry, he faced 3 direct, incredibly intense temptations out in the wilderness. The pattern here is crystal clear. Louder, more aggressive attacks usually mean you are standing right next to the finish line. Let's look at Nehemiah. He was on the absolute verge of finishing the wall around Jerusalem, and his enemies just lost their minds. They mocked him, they threatened him daily. But look closely at this quote from Nehemiah 6:9. The enemies weren't actually targeting Nehemiah's faith. They were targeting his hands. They wanted his physical strength to fail so the work would just stop. When the opposition gets incredibly loud, it's because whatever you're building is about to become unstoppable. So the enemy's very last resort is to attack your energy to continue. And right while the enemy is screaming at top volume, we hit sign number 4. God goes quiet. Honestly, this is probably the hardest trial for any believer to sit with. You're used to feeling that connection. The worship used to move you, the scriptures used to practically jump off the page, and prayer felt like this vibrant two-way street. And now, well, it's just silence. It just feels so empty. Job articulated the spiritual isolation absolutely perfectly in the very midst of his profound suffering. He agonized, if only I knew where to find him. He was searching frantically for God's voice, for just any explanation, and he heard absolutely nothing. It is an incredibly isolating place to be. But our source provides this incredibly powerful analogy to reframe this divine silence. Think about it. When a surgeon is operating on you, performing the most critical, life-saving procedure imaginable, they do not stand there making small talk with you, right? They are absolutely silent. Why? Because they are intensely focused. The silence isn't abandonment on side A. It is pure concentration on side B. God's deepest work is often his absolute quietest work. Section 4. Emptying in the final condition. Sign number 5 is that old things are falling away. Relationships are ending. Career opportunities are abruptly closing. The things you used to rely on are just suddenly disappearing. And man, it feels entirely like loss. But the source material asks us to look at Joseph. Before Joseph stepped into his massive destiny to rule Egypt, every single thing was stripped from him. His iconic coat, his freedom, his reputation, his family connections, all of it just gone. Joseph later realized the actual purpose behind this profound emptying. In Genesis 50:20, he says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." God often allows the very things we rely on to be removed so that we are completely emptied out. Because, if we aren't emptied, we just end up trusting in our own resources, our own networks, and our own coats instead of trusting in Him. Which brings us to the core takeaway of this 5th sign. You simply cannot hold the new thing if your hands are still full of the old thing. What looks suspiciously like God taking things away from you is, in reality, God aggressively making room for the incredible things He is actively bringing to you. So let's recap. We have the pressure, the exhaustion, the loud enemies, the profound silence, and the painful emptying. That is what a breakthrough actually looks like right before it arrives. But the harvest comes with one strict, non-negotiable condition. Galatians 6:9 spells it out clearly. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. That word "if" carries the weight of the entire process. Your harvest is entirely dependent on you not quitting while you're in the dark. Which leaves us with this final crucial question. Are you willing to hold on just a little bit longer? God has never been late. Not for Abraham, not for Joseph, not for Lazarus, and definitely not for you. If this structured breakdown of the biblical pattern brought you some clarity today, I highly encourage you to share this explainer with someone who is currently walking through their own incredibly hard season. Keep moving forward, even when the water is right there in the way. Because what if your sea is about to part tomorrow?